Hi everyone, my name is Paresh Gupta and I'm a technical marketing engineer in Cisco. And today for the next 60 minutes, I'll talk about making your SAN awesome using the Nexus dashboard and Nexus dashboard fabric controller for managing your SAN environment. Right. Now, this is a fairly lengthy topic. Typically, goes for a 1 day or 2 day training session if we have to cover all the details, but we just got 1 hour, so I'll touch on a few high-level topics. But if you have any questions, just feel free, throw it in Q&A panel or chat, and then, we'll cover those, and then based on your questions, we can have follow-ups. Right. So starting with the background, and for those of us who know about Nexus dashboard, just bear with me for a few minutes because I just want to make sure that all of us are at the same page. And I want to explain what is the background behind Nexus dashboard and what is Nexus dashboard fabric controller and why we built it the way you see it today, right? So essentially, if you go back in the time, maybe 20 years back, that's when Cisco entered the fiber channel market using the MDS product line. And that's when we also had a product called Fabric Manager. That Fabric Manager was used to manage the fiber channel environments, right? Now, over the years, we added a lot of features to it. We renamed it a few times, and I think the last time we called it as Data Center Network Manager or DCNM. But 20 years is a long time, and we also realize there are a lot of use cases that we cannot solve with that 20-year-old architecture, especially around analytics, flow visibility. Those are the features that were really lacking. So instead of retrofitting the features or the new enhancements in the older product, what we did, we rewrote this whole application from scratch. And when we rewrote it, we also renamed it. And when we rewrote it, we used a new architecture. So when you look at the architecture, we first designed a hosting platform, and that's what we call as Nexus dashboard. Or in short, we call it ND. So if you talk to a lot of Cisco folks, people just call it as ND, right? ND really means Nexus dashboard, and it's a hosting platform. And on top of the hosting platform, you can run multiple applications. Now, for us, the only relevant application for this R is Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. So one thing is for sure, there's clear difference between ND and NDFC because ND is the hosting platform and NDFC is an app or a service that runs on ND. Now, the very simple way to understand it is just like we have our phones and we buy the base phone, maybe, Apple phone or Android phone. And then on top of that, we install apps to make it more relevant to us. It's a very similar idea that we have the hosting platform that's NDE or Nexus Dashboard, and NDFC is an application on top of it. Now, for most of your day-to-day operations for SAN management will be done on NDFC, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. But your basic infrastructure services like authentication, like upgrades of the Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller itself will be handled from Nexus Dashboard platform, right? The other key benefit of Nexus Dashboard is because we rewrote it, we designed it in a way so that it provides you active clustering. So if a customer decides that NDFC is part of their key infrastructure and they want high availability in that, they can run 3 nodes like as 3 separate physical or virtual nodes of Nexus dashboard and create an active cluster among these. And the benefit of that, let's say if one of these fails, the rest 2 can still continue to manage your SAN environment. Right, so that's one model. However, we also realize not everybody may like that. So in that case, we also allow, you can totally run a single node or a one node of Nexus dashboard. Now, when it comes to deploying it, and I'll talk about deployment in a bit more detail, but there are different form factors for it. You can run, OVA on top of ESXi. That's one. The second thing is we offer a Linux installer as an installer that can run on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And the third option is we also ship a physical appliance. So this physical appliance is nothing but a Cisco UCS server, and the server is pre-provisioned with all the resources that you need to run NDFC. And you just run it like just like the way you run MDS switches, right? If you really think about the switches, the hardware and software is totally governed by Cisco, right? Cisco totally supports it. If let's say a fan tray fails, you call Cisco. If there's a bug in the software, you call Cisco. So in a very similar model, with the physical appliance of Nexus dashboard, anything that goes wrong with the physical or the software piece of that appliance, you just call Cisco. Right, so these are the high level idea. I think the key point that you want to remember is that Nexus dashboard is the platform and a lot of services are governed by that. But when it comes to day-to-day SAN operations, you are talking about an application or a service that runs on that platform, and we call it as Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller, or NDFC in short. Right, and I'll show you these things in a few minutes, so I think at that time it will become more clear. Now, talking about benefits, what are the benefits of this architecture? Some of these benefits I already talked about. One thing is clearly higher scale, and I'll keep on referring to that because we rewrote the application, we could offer a much better scale. Things like 1 million flows at a initiator, target, and LUN granularity. In short, we call it as ITL flow. So, a single NDFC server now supports visibility into a 1 million ITN flows, things like that. The second thing that you see on the slide, which I already explained, that you can run our Nexus dashboard as a 3-node cluster, and if one of them fails, you still have your operations running. If you decide to choose physical appliance, you can have the complete ownership of this platform, the software and the hardware piece to it. Also, there are new features inside Nexus dashboard which were not available before, like anomaly detection, like event analytics, one view, and I'll explain one view a bit more detail in a few minutes. For all our existing customers, and it's a big deal, for all our existing customers, we allow free upgrade from DCNM to NDFC. Right, that's a big deal because I know our competition, when they did something similar, they forced all the customers to buy new licenses just because there was a new application out there. Now we are not doing that, right? So as I said, think about a customer who bought a MDS 9700 Director in 2013, and at that time they paid for the license of DCNM. Now we are in 2023 today, 10 years forward. That 9710 system still have a life left in it because we just launched the 64 gig modules for it. So that customer can upgrade to NDFC without paying anything more. I think if you look across the industry, you won't find many, precedents of such an investment protection anywhere out there. Right, and the final point that you see for those of us who like to automate their infrastructure, which I guess a lot of customers like to do these days, everything that you see on Nexus dashboard and NDFC is full-featured APIs. Anything that you see on UI is driven by APIs, and you can call them by yourselves and do any of your custom use cases. Okay, so that's a bit high-level overview of Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller and NDFC. Now, before I talk and spend more time about these slides, I want to show you a bit of this platform. Right now, in the deck, I don't have many slides, but there are some detailed slides like these, like what's running under the hood. Right, I don't really want to explain it because this is less relevant for a user, but the content is here. Take a look, and if you have questions, reach out. We'll be more than happy to answer that. Right. So I think this time let's just look inside the platform. So essentially, when you log in, and by the way, I'm going to show you a version that is not out yet, but this version is 12.1.3 of NDFC, and it should be out like in 2 to 3 weeks time frame, right? So you're essentially looking at future, but just to give you an idea, because if you're running an existing version of Nexus dashboard, you may feel that some of your menu items have changed, some UI looks different, and the color scheme might be different, but the functionality, the base platform is the same, right? So when you log into the platform, look, you get to see something like this, right? And it says Nexus dashboard here, and it says admin console. So remember I told you Nexus dashboard is the hosting platform. And when you install Nexus dashboard, you see something like this. Now, at this time, anything that you see on the screen is about the health of this server itself, right? It's not showing you the health of your switches. We have not gone there yet. We'll reach there in a few minutes, right? So if you just want to know that how's the connectivity doing, if everything is okay with this node, how the total service is running, this is all under the hood architecture of Nexus dashboard. Probably you care about it for when you install it, when you upgrade it. But as I said, most of the time you don't care about it much. Now, the key point is when you go under the services, from here, you can install services or apps on Nexus dashboard. So for that, you can go, you can manually upload an app here, right? Or if you have connected this Nexus dashboard to the internet, you can directly download it from cisco.com, just like you see this. But for this to work, you must have connectivity to the internet, and you can directly install it from here. But I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of customers who may not provide access to the internet. So for them, they can download it offline from cisco.com or any other OSM that they may have a contract with, and then just upload the service here, right? And then you see one of the services that I have running here is called Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. As I said a few times, and I'll keep on reiterating it, this is what a SAN admin or a usual operations person needs, right? But before going there, I just want to show you a few more things that you need for Nexus dashboard. One of the key things is that all your authentication is controlled from Nexus dashboard to provide a single sign-on. So for that, you can go to users, you can create some local users, or if you like to use some remote, let's say LDAP server, you create from here, right? You do not set authentication from NDFC, right? You won't find that menu there. So for that, you must come here. The other important thing is, I mean, obviously there's a lot more things, and I don't think I'm going to cover all of them for the interest of time, but the key point here is that there's something called, um, when you come to system settings, and by the way, this menu has changed, right? If you are running uh, Nexus dashboard today in the released version of Nexus dashboard, which is 12.1.2, and I want to show you that as well, so that there's no confusion. If you look at the recording and you try to match it with what you have today, you may see things differently, because right now, what you're seeing right now, this is 12.1.2 version of Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller and 12.3.1 version of Nexus Dashboard. So here the menu items are a bit different, right? In the infrastructure, you click on cluster configuration. But in the next release, you go to admin, you click on system settings, and you see a multi-cluster connectivity. But before that, if you look at the general, one of the key things that you have to do for installing Nexus dashboard is to provide multiple IP addresses to it, right? And I'll talk about that in a few minutes, that how many IP addresses and where do you find all the details and like why do you need all that. But like I'll answer the last question, why do you need all that? You can find the answer right here. There's something called external services pools. And here you see there are multiple IP addresses, 3 of them at least, in addition to the 2 IP addresses that you have already installed. So essentially, we're talking about 5 IP addresses, and then you see the reason that why do you need this. So these are essentially persistent IP addresses. Let's say you move Nexus dashboard to any other node, or if something happens with, let's say, your high availability cluster, if one of the node fails, these IP addresses continue to be same. And remember, these are the IP addresses you'll configure on your MDS switches to export, let's say, SAN insights metrics. This is the IP address you're going to configure on your MDS switches for sending syslog and SNMP trap data. And then this is the IP address you're going to, the NDFC server uses if it wants to open an SSH session to the switches and, let's say, create a configuration. Right. Now you'll find all the details in the documentation. I'll refer you there. You don't really have to remember, but I'm just trying to convey that how do you come here and set up these IP addresses? Because without these, some of the services will not work. So for example, if you try to configure SAN insights, it will complain if this IP address, or let's say 3 IP addresses, have not been configured. So at the time, you shouldn't be surprised that why there's an error, because at the time of installation, you should provide multiple IP addresses. So look, to find the latest version of Nexus dashboard, you use your favorite search engine and just look for NDFC release notes. All right, whatever the link that you have, just go here. And it shows me the latest version is 12.1.2, right? Now, you can find the same information from Nexus dashboard, and that Nexus dashboard is the latest version is 2.3, right? Now, 2 to 3 weeks from now, I mean, in worst case scenario, by the end of August, you'll see here version 3.0 of Nexus dashboard. Remember, we're talking about Nexus dashboard here. And then at the same time, you will see 12.1.3 here listed, right? And I'm sure in release notes, I think most of us know that you can go here and figure out what are the new software features. And if you're curious, okay, what's new and why should I care? You can find the list of features here, right? Specifically for SAN, for example, these were the new features in 12.1.2. Okay, now while we're looking at the documentation, I'll also mention that, look, when deploying, and look, I cannot show you how to deploy because it takes a bit longer and I cannot finish it in an hour, but I can show you the steps. So essentially, again, use your favorite search engine, and this time look for Cisco Nexus dashboard install guide. I mean, this is the way how I use it, right? So I'm just telling you what I do, right? And you'll come here and then just click on the link. And remember, you see multiple steps here, right? There are different form factors, but first thing you may want to look, and this is probably used by all the customers, is like deployment overview, and like, let's say there's an ISO that you would throw it on a physical appliance, there's an OVA, there's a Red Hat version. Now you see more, but these are not relevant for SAN environment, right? So be aware of that. You'll find these restrictions listed. The other thing you may want to be aware is that how do you set it up? How should be your design, right? So we'll come to that, but most of the time the question is, if you have firewalls between your Nexus dashboard and your switches, what ports you should open and in what direction? You'll find the entire list here. So you can send this list to your security teams or your network teams, and it's a lot less work for you at that time. This is almost a frequently asked question. Hey, what ports I need to open? And it's all listed here. The other thing is these designs, like this is obviously a lot more complex because these are the designs for VXLAN LAN-based Ethernet fabrics. For SAN, it's not as complex, right? And I'll refer you to a documentation that's specifically written for SAN, right? And yeah, I mean, these are the other things that, before you start, it's a pre-installation checklist. You should have this thing ready, right? Because changing these things after won't be possible, right? So make sure before you attempt an installation, just like keep this thing ready. Right now, if you go and take a look on VMware ESX, one thing I'll point you to that is that anytime you deploy, okay, I don't really have to tell you how to deploy OVF, but the key point is that for those of us who are trying to deploy a 3-node Nexus dashboard cluster, you must ensure that you set it up during the time of installation. So what I'm trying to say is, if you deploy a 1-node Nexus dashboard today, you cannot convert it to a 3-node Nexus dashboard later, right? So it must be a design level decision. Now you can actually export the config and import it in a new installation of 3-node Nexus dashboard cluster. That's a separate conversation. But once you choose to deploy Nexus dashboard, you must decide, do you want to go with 1-node or 3-node? Now, if you're going with 1-node, that's okay. You just forward, and like when you reach to this screen, you see this screen. At the time, I probably zoom into this one a little bit more, right? You'll see a screen like this. And if you're deploying a 1-node Nexus dashboard, no problem. Just click next. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to proceed? And you can always say, yeah, we know what we're doing, right? So just move on. However, if you choose to deploy a 3-node Nexus dashboard cluster, at that time, you must bring all these 3 nodes of Nexus dashboard to this screen and wait. Do not proceed. And then come to your master or a primary node and enter the details of the rest of the 2 nodes like the way you see on the screen here. Okay, it's extremely important. Otherwise, if you do not do this and proceed further, you'll not be able to go back. Okay, so add the 2 nodes right here while they are waiting at the screen, and that's when you click next. When you do that, that's when the installation will proceed correctly for a 3-node active cluster. Okay, I think this is one of a pitfall, so I'm like, spending a few minutes here. Otherwise, if it's just a 1-node Nexus dashboard cluster, just proceed. Nothing much to worry about. Okay, so this is about Nexus dashboard. Now, in addition to that, there's a white paper that you can look it up. And by the way, all these links I have in the slides, so you'll find that. But I guess most of us just like to web search the thing, so that's what I'm trying to do, right? So install white paper. So there are some white papers here about Nexus dashboard, but I think the one that I'm trying to point you to is this one. It says Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller Deployment Guide. And if you open this one, there is a specific section for SAN controller, right? So you should click here. I mean, because as I said, this is a single platform that runs a lot of other applications. You saw that when I showed you that in a few minutes earlier. Stay focused and like just come to this link and it will show you what you need to do just for SAN, right? And obviously you can take a look. It's a big white paper. There's a lot more details. You just like figure it out and like search what you need, right? Right. So at least you know where to go and take a look. Okay. So that's like basic about installation. Like, you'll find how many IP addresses you need. It just explains here. I said it 5 IP addresses you need for that. We have a concept called a management network, right? In one of the designs, you'll see, like if this is the Nexus dashboard, we have a concept called a management network and we have a concept called data network. So the management network is how a user like I access Nexus dashboard, right? And then there's a data network. So that data network exists between the Nexus dashboard server and the switches. Now, in most cases, these can be same, right? But because it's a microservices based architecture and there are Kubernetes services running in the backend, they like to create that differentiation primarily so that they can support the 3-node active cluster. Right now, there's a small, some feedback thing there that some of the customers are not really liking. That why do we mandate having 2 different subnets? Like you see, we have the VLAN of the management subnet here, and then we have the VLAN of the data subnet here. So as of right now, these 2 subnets must be separate, right? And we are changing that very soon. In the next release, we are going to relax that limitation and you can have the 2 subnets belonging to the same subnet, like, if that makes sense. But, right now you see both of these IP addresses can belong to, let's say, 10.10.10.1, and you can have the second one as well in 10.10.10.2, something like that. You don't really have to come up with a separate subnet. Okay, and how you're going to find that information? Again, the way to find that information would be you go look for the release notes. Anytime you need to find that thing, I think I open the release notes and you look for that information. Okay, did I let go? No, here's the release notes, right? So in a few weeks, when the 12.1.3 release notes are out, you'll find that information listed here. Okay. Now, moving on, one of the features that I want to bring your attention to is OneView. Now, what exactly is OneView? So let's think about this, right? And, this is a typical scenario, primarily for large customers. So let's say in this example, there is a customer who has some SAN fabrics in, let's say, America. Some of them are in Europe and some of them are in Asia. Now, obviously, because of distance limitation or probably for separate teams managing these, they would like to have separate Nexus dashboard servers managing these different fabrics. Now, depending on their decision, they may choose to have one node of Nexus dashboard, or they may choose to have three nodes of Nexus dashboard, right? So until this point, all these are separate Nexus dashboard servers. However, because they still belong to the same organization, the high level management likes to see a single pane of glass visibility, right? So for that, we have a feature called Nexus Dashboard One View and NDFC One View, right? Now, Nexus Dashboard One View, the difference is that the Nexus Dashboard One View shows you the visibility of the platform itself, like how are these different Nexus dashboard servers are doing by themselves. But more important is how are the switches or the SAN switches that are managed by these Nexus dashboard servers are doing. So that's something you get to see in NDFC One View. And I'll show you how exactly these things work out. So I think the 2 points that I want to say before I show you a demo is number one, first of all, there's a no separate license for One View feature. So you can have multiple Nexus dashboard servers. And when you try to get this single pane of glass visibility, you don't have to pay anything more, right? It's all inclusive. And that's a major point because, as I said, our competition charges separate license for that similar function. We don't do that. That's number one. The number two is, look, the way we design it is that it's all interlinked with single sign-on. So let's say here I'm showing you three Nexus dashboard servers. And if there's a user that has logged in into Nexus dashboard 1 and that user decides to go and look for a SAN fabric that's managed by Nexus dashboard 2, that user can totally move that seamlessly, right? As long as that user has the right privilege assigned by a remote authentication platform, let's say LDAP, right? So let me show you this one, how exactly it works. Right, so this is my Nexus dashboard, but remember I logged in using admin. My user is admin, and this is a local user, right? Now, because it's a local user, uh, I don't see anything in addition to what this local Nexus dashboard server owns, which is Nexus dashboard fabric controller, only one of that. And if I click on that, let's just see what I see, right? So as you can see, this is the NDFC server now, and there are some SAN fabrics here, two of them, Fab A, Fab B. And anything that I see is locally managed by this Nexus dashboard server. Now let me log out. And this time I'm going to log in a different account, which is not local, that is remote, right? And assuming this account has the right privilege, you see there are a lot more fabrics I see now. When I go under one view, now I get to see multiple Nexus dashboard servers, right? So I can click on one of these. And one thing that you'll see differently this time is obviously I get to see my local fabrics that are managed by this NDFC server or this Nexus dashboard servers, right? This is the same view I was seeing before, but if you notice, there's a single breadcrumb here. And if I click on one view, now I'm seeing a single pane of glass visibility across all my SAN fabrics across the world that are managed by different Nexus dashboard servers. So you see there are a lot more fabrics, there are a lot more switches, and I get to see a consolidated view of all of them. Right. Now, at some point, let's say if I go here in SAN and I say go to fabrics, right? And if I decide, okay, I want to see something that is managed by different Nexus dashboard server, remember it's ND3 now, I logged into ND2, and if I click on this fabric, Give it a second. It's going to go there without asking me to log in again. The single sign-on works seamlessly, right? So hopefully, conveys the value that for those of us who have that kind of large environments, or even smaller environments that managed by different teams, and still they like to have a single pane of glass visibility. NDFC One View is the feature for them, and it's totally free. Uh, and look, the last point I'll add this, which probably it's not worth spending time on, but sometimes there's a question, hey, how do you configure it? I mean, configuring it is the easiest part. So the way you would do is just go under infrastructure, go to cluster configuration, multi-cluster connectivity. That's it. And all you have to do is like, go here and add a new server, right? Okay. So that's another key point. The other thing I'll mention is about SAN inside scale, and this is something new and also conveys the value of a Nexus dashboard as a platform. So look, when we talk about SAN insights, and I didn't really spend much time on it, but this is a feature on the MDS switches because of the spatial ASICs. These are custom designed fiber gen ASICs that we design in Cisco. So these ASICs, in addition to switching the frames from one port to another port, they also do deep packet inspection and collect metrics all the way to a flow level. And the way we define a flow is an initiator, target, and LUN, or a namespace if you're running NVMe. So on a single MDS 9700 director, that switch can inspect up to 100,000 flows at a microsecond granularity, right? And I really mean that. And what I define, if let me try to zoom into my slides. If you log into the switch and run this command, show analytics info initiator ITL, you'll see an output like this. And I want to bring attention to this average ECT. This is nothing but the exchange completion time, or you may know it as IO completion time or just latency. And you see the units here is microsecond. I mean, they call it as U second, but this is really microsecond. So essentially, it's trying to tell you is that this initiated target and LUN flow took 282 microseconds to complete the read IO operations, right? So that's how we define real-time visibility. But in addition to that, the switches export these metrics every 30 seconds to Nexus dashboard. And then Nexus dashboard receives these metrics from many switches in the fabric, while a single server can have up to 1 million flows. And then it converts these metrics into very intuitive, use cases, things like detecting an anomaly from any of those flows. And I think I've talked about these things, how do anomalies works, but a simple example is that, let's say if any point of time out of these million flows, if there's a single flow that takes, let's say, more than a millisecond to complete read IO operations, at the time, you can create an anomaly and it will show up on your dashboard. You can also forward that as an email and be aware of that, right? There's also a lot more use cases. Again, probably a conversation for another day, but there's automatic baseline happening, there's deviation trending, there's an end-to-end correlation all the way between the VMs and your LUN or namespace, right? So the key point for the context today to remember is the higher scale. If you look across the industry, not just the SAN industry, the capability to monitor 1 million flows is totally unparalleled. Nobody comes close to that, right? And why it's important? Because of this high scale, our customers can monitor everything, and they don't really have to miss on anything at all, right? So it's an always on and real-time visibility that they can get with Nexus Dashboard. And this is a big reason. A lot of time customers ask that, hey, what is so great about Nexus Dashboard? Why should I move away from NDFC and why should I move away from DCNM and move to NDFC? And this is a big reason, because DCNM did not have that kind of scale because of the new architecture that we did with NDFC. Okay. And there are some new features coming, right? So one thing I'll mention is that I spoke about this a few minutes earlier, but with 12.13, this is the new release that's coming out in a few weeks. Uh, this NDFC will be able to run with a single subnet, right? So the requirement to have two subnets will be relaxed. That's number one. The other thing is, if you take a look on our documentation right now, one thing that has caused some kind of grief before is that a lot of customers said that, hey, to run SAN insights, right? Uh, it needs 32 vCPUs, 128 gig RAM, and 3 terabyte SSD, right? Now, some of the customers said, hey, we got 2 4 switches, right? These are small switches. It just doesn't make sense for me to have a server like this. And I think that's a very fair point, right? Honestly, if I was somebody who would run 4 fiber channel switches or 8 fiber channel switches, I don't want to have a server like this, right? Uh, Now, why we needed this kind of requirement is because for SAN Insights, we needed something called a data node of Nexus dashboard. Now, you don't really have to understand that like it's another level of detail, but we needed a data Nexus dashboard. What we're doing in the next release, we are enabling SAN Insights in app node. And the app node of Nexus dashboard runs on 16 vCPUs, 64 gig RAM, and 550 SSD storage. So essentially, it's our attempt of removing that hurdle for those smaller customers who want to use SAN Insights, but they are unable to because of the huge requirements that the platform needs. Right. So this is one change you'll see happening in a few weeks' time. The only caveat that I'll mention that with app node, if you choose to run with 16 vCPU, 64 gig RAM, and 550 GB SSD, then the customers will only get visibility at an initiated and target flow level. But if these customers need visibility all the way to the LUN level or the namespace level, they would still have to use the data node of Nexus dashboard that requires 32 vCPUs and 128 gig RAM and 3 terabyte SSD. Okay, now besides that, there are some new features coming. And let me show you that, what I mean by that, right? Okay, now before showing you the features, look, I kind of like explained you the architecture of Nexus Dashboard and Nexus Dashboard Fabric Controller. So as a service, as a set, NDFC runs. So you can come here or open or directly go to the drop down. I think this is more convenient to go from the drop down and just go on Fabric Controller. Right now, this is something what you're going to use on day-to-day basis, right? I keep on referring to that because, yeah, you don't want to spend much time on Nexus dashboard. That's really the intent, that you spend more time and like stay focused on your SAN fabric health, not really the health of this platform itself. Now you see some fabrics here, but let me show you how would you get started. The very first thing you would do, which happens during the time of installation, is you go under settings and you actually come across something called feature management. And here you would choose SAN controller and just select all of them and enable these services, right? So that's first step. After that, you should go to SAN, say fabrics, and then say actions, click on add fabric. Now this is here where you'll see something like fabric A, and then you'll see something like whatever IP address you want to add here. And then whatever the way you have created a user on your MDS switches, you would choose that and just add that user ID and password, right? If you have UCS servers connected to this fabric, you can actually add credentials for UCS2, and after doing that, you'll have visibility into the traffic of those UCS servers as well, right? Otherwise, you'd skip this step. And remember, I think the fabric discovery process is the same as it has been for many years. You just have to specify one seed switch IP, and after that, NDFC server will discover all the switches in that fabric. Okay, that's pretty much it. Like, after that, it's just like give it like 10-15 minutes. It will discover the fabric. You'll have all this information being populated. right? Obviously, I cannot explain you all the features today, but hopefully it gives you a glimpse of what you get. Like you get to find the top congested ISL, the top congested end devices, what's wrong, where wrong. You can always click on these things, like why there's a critical event, and it shows that seems like there's something unreachable. So if I have to take a guess, sounds to me there's some might be credential issues, like why it's unable to SSH. Right, they are all the switches in the fabric. uh, some of the things that I always recommend, you can create backups, right? You can create, let's say you can go action and say backup now. And this is, I can say fab A and just say okay, right? It may take a few seconds to create that backup. Essentially, it's taking all the configuration from the switches and storing with this Nexus dashboard server, right? The other thing that you can do instead of creating this backup live, you can actually go to actions and you can say configure backup. And now you can schedule the backup. So you can say, I mean, not daily, daily is probably too much, but I'll let you decide that. You can go to Sunday and maybe every Sunday, maybe 1 a.m., let's say every night, right? Or every weekly night, take backups and just schedule it. Right. So this is another part of the basic configuration that you should do. There's a very cool feature that you don't have to configure. It's enabled by default. It's called configuration monitor. And the way it works is that it creates a baseline config. And there's something wrong with that baseline config. Let's say somebody changed the configuration without, you may not be aware of that. And if that config is accidentally changed, you will come to know about it, and there would be an event created for that. So I think I have another Nexus dashboard server that shows you that feature in a better way. So you'll see the coding turning red, right? So that it catches your attention, and you don't really have to come to the screen. Okay, you see this? There's a configuration drift, and if you click on this, yes, it shows you what changed, right? Okay. So if I take a look, seems like somebody added a new server for sending SNMP trap from the switch. Now, this is something that you don't wish to add, and it's an accidental change. You know what to do. You can always refer to your config, right? And if this is something okay, then you would just click and say, yeah, I mean, select the switch, and there's a way to, reset baseline configuration. Okay, so this is another thing that you should do. There's a congestion analysis. This you don't really have to do anything about it. In the recent releases, we have enabled by default. All you have to do, like, there's a way of sending automatic alerts when the switches detect congestion. That feature is called port monitor. You should configure that. But after receiving the alerts, if you want to do some historic investigation, just click here, sort this thing. I'm sure you got your attention the way I sorted this. Essentially, in one click you find the source of congestion, and you can always click on this and figure out where are the things, right? How is the things happening, or you can always go real time as well, right? So when you go real time, in every 10 seconds this will refresh. I mean, it's really important because let's say if you're doing some active real-time troubleshooting, you have a peer in your team who's trying to change something, and then you're on phone call, hey, I made the change, can you tell me if it worked or not? So for that scenario, now you see the graph's been updated in real time, and then you can uh, let's say somebody did a vMotion and they relieved a host from an excessive load, and then you can tell whether the congestion severity is increasing or decreasing in real time. So that's why we added this real time option, and it's fairly new, right? Okay, I think in the interest of time, I'll just like walk you through, just show you. I mean, it's not possible to cover everything. You can click on image management. So image management is doing an in-service software upgrade or a non-disruptive upgrade of your MDF switches. You can define the policies here, right? So And you can actually, let's say, especially if you, let's say, customers who have many switches, right? You can actually upload your images here. Then you can define a policy saying that, hey, I want to upgrade this switch with that image and that switch with some other image, things like that, with all kind of permutations and combinations. And then you can just schedule it. And eventually you'll see something like this, right? So if there's something, let's say you created a policy, you want to upgrade the switch, but the upgrade did not go through, it's going to point you there. And it also shows you the history, right? Like when you upgraded a switch, whether it went through or not, right? So things like that. So essentially, it's a full-featured management platform, right? Like one thing that we did not spend much time on is about SAN insights and visibility. So obviously, you get to see the visibility of all the flows. Remember, I was explaining about those million ITL flows and getting the completion time values and all that. So you, in a single click, you can find where's the slowest source and fastest source. And if you want to dig further, you can actually click on these things anytime and it provides you a lot more details, things like these. Look, these are the real-time completion time values. So you can track via that. Otherwise, there's a new feature that I was referring to on the slides. It's called host dashboards, right? So anything that you want to know about your hosts is right here. And there's a lot more information that you can find, right? I mean, like how many paths are there, how much traffic is going through every path, how many VMs are there. Not just that, we have integrated feature called FDMI, that stands for Fabric Discovery Management Interface. I mean, you don't really have to worry about acronyms, honestly, but what's more important is like, you see, NDFC servers inline without logging to those end devices can tell you what HBA they are running, what is the firmware version, who's the, is it an initiator target and all that. Then there's another feature called remote diagnostics parameter or RDP that tells you a lot more information about that end device. So remember this, let's say if you click on the sensors, it tells you the health of the SFP, and this SFP is plugged into the HBA of the server, right? This is not the local switch port information. That information is at other places in NDFC. But everything that you see on the screen is the information of the HBA port, right? So this is really getting about the endpoint visibility into NDFC server in band. You don't have to create a login or ask your compute admins or server admins for that access.